have Jurrien Heynen, who's obviously the Distribution Support Office Director, and he's going to talk to us about how has working abroad influenced your career development.
Thanks. So good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to ask everyone to stand up if I could. If you've never worked abroad, can you sit down, please? We've lost quite a few. If you worked abroad more than once, sorry, if you've only worked abroad once, can you sit down, please? So we've got one, two. I was going to ask you guys to come and do my presentation for me, but seeing as there's three of you, I won't. Okay, thank you. Please take a seat. So I think probably what that little exercise did, apart from getting everyone up out of their seat, hopefully you're not too bored so far, but at least it got everyone standing up, was to show that Nigel and Richard looking at me very strangely. But so there are a number of people clearly who've worked abroad, but for quite a lot of people, working abroad is not something that they've done, and quite a lot of people go through their careers without ever going abroad. What I wanted to do this afternoon was just share a bit of my experiences of working abroad. So I'm going to go kind of briefly through my career and just pull out those bits where I've worked abroad. So my first job abroad was when I was working with Christian Salverson. So I joined Christian Salverson on their graduate scheme. Basically got put into one of their big distribution centres for Marks and Spencers, and within about 6 or 8 weeks, I was managing a team of people, all of whom were older than myself, and it was quite a daunting experience to be honest. But within about 3.5, 4 years, Christian Salverson sent me off to Portugal, where they had the contract for running Marks and Spencer's distribution operations in Portugal. And I have to say that of all of the roles that I've done in my career, that's probably the one that gave me the most learning experiences, and the one that probably set me up for the rest of my career. I remember I went to Portugal. I didn't know anyone else in Portugal. I didn't speak Portuguese, and there was no one else English there at all. So it really was quite an interesting experience. And I can remember I've been there. I think I've probably been there about a week, and I can remember sitting in my office, and this was in a little distribution centre about 30 kilometres west of Lisbon. And I can remember, really thinking to myself and feeling, wow, the buck really does stop with me here. This is totally my accountability. This operation, this supply chain that I'm running. And my boss came to see me. I was there 2 years. I think my boss from the UK came to see me 3 times. I had a boss, or a notional boss, in Spain, where Christian Salverson had some operations. So he was supposed to kind of sign off all of the accounts and everything else. I think I saw him twice. So it really was an experience where I was left to stand on my own 2 feet. And in all of the roles that I've done since then, I've never had the same amount of autonomy as I had then, which did lead to some kind of quite interesting experiences. So one of the things was I had to sign off my own expenses, which is for anyone who's done that, it's quite an interesting experience. And one day I remember that so the company bank account, where Christian Salverson Portugal, the bank account where we put all of the money that we got from M&S in, where that bank account was the same place that I put my own personal bank account. were paying me in Portugal. So I can remember I went to see the account manager, and I had, of course, the same account manager. It was only a small place in Estoril. Same account manager did the company account as did my account. So I asked him to transfer a few £1,000s, I think. I'd been there a few months by then. Can he transfer a few £1,000s back to my account in the UK? Sure, Jurrien, no problem. A couple of weeks later, I'm going through, and one of the responsibilities I had was going through the accounts and making sure that all of the cash and everything reconciled and so on. I was going through all of the ledger and saw this transfer £5,000 to account DJ Heynen UK out of the. I thought, oh my God! And what he'd done. So what he'd done was, instead of transferring £5,000 out of my account to the UK, he transferred £5,000 out of the company account to the UK. And reflecting back on it now, given the amount of autonomy I had, I probably could have got away with that for a couple of years. And of course, I went through a whole thing. I actually wrote to Salverson's auditors in Scotland, explaining what I'd done and transferred all of the money back. So, as well as being kind of quite an interesting anecdote for me to be able to use, it really did demonstrate how much autonomy that I had. And my boss, when he finally did come to see me, he described it as, you can paint the walls green. And he said, if you decide one day you can come into work and you decide, right, the priority for today is we're going to paint the walls green, that's what I could have done. I could have decided, right, we're not doing anything for M&S today. We're going to paint the walls green. But I think probably the big thing for me out of that experience was that when you really have to be, you can be amazingly resilient. And you can really, really rely on yourself to do things. When there is nobody else, and like I said, in all of the roles that I've done since then, I've never had that same amount of autonomy. I guess I've had a structure around me. There's always somebody that you can check something with. Literally there I had nobody, and as I said, what it taught me is that when you absolutely have to rely on yourself, either personally or professionally, then invariably you absolutely can. I left Christian Salverson and went to work for Dixon's. So my job with Dixon's was actually, I ran their national distribution centre at Stevenage, which was a difficult experience. I joined Dixon's, I think it was 6 or 8 weeks after they'd implemented a new warehouse management system in their national distribution centre. They pushed the button and it went bang, and it basically didn't work. So I went in 8 weeks after that, trying to rescue things, which was an amazingly tough job. And I think the resilience that I'd learned that I had when I was out in Portugal really helped me get through that experience at Dixon's. Before too long, I then went off. I worked in Paris for a couple of years for Dixon's. So Dixon's decided that they were going to expand in Europe, and they opened a business called PC City in France, which was basically PC World in France. And I went out there to set up the supply chain. And I think that, again, it was an interesting role. It was very, very different from my role in Portugal, because there was a whole support team around me, and what we were setting out to do, it was very exciting. We were setting up a new business, and I must admit, after the Portugal experience, I found it a little bit frustrating, because there were all sorts of things that I had to do to get things signed off and everything else. But we successfully launched, first of all, a website in Paris. Then we launched, then we opened a few stores. So we were going through a few things. And again, I think I look back now and think about that experience, and what that experience certainly taught me was that when you do go and do something like that and you go abroad, invariably you get exposed much more to the whole end-to-end workings of the business, because generally there aren't enough, you don't have the huge structure. We don't have an operations development department of however many people there are. There's a few people around, and you end up doing lots and lots of things that actually you don't have a huge amount of experience in, and you have to go and just get on with it. And I think I would absolutely recommend that as something to go and do, because it just forces you to think about things more broadly. And I know it certainly taught me to think about things much more broadly than I had before. So I think that one of the things I did was I ended up designing the back room of the PC City stores in Paris, because nobody else had really done a huge amount of that before. Nobody else was really sure about were the French trucks the same as the UK trucks and all of that kind of thing. So it was literally, well, Jurrien, you're the one, your trucks are going to be delivering it, so there you go. Work with some architects and the designers, and you tell them what it needs to be, and that was it, literally. So very much from that role, I think, being forced to think more broadly, being forced to think about the wider things in the business, very much is a good thing. And almost the earlier that you can do that kind of challenging thing in your career, the better I think it will set you up. So for all of those youngsters in the room, which probably excludes me and Mike, not so much Richard, but think about, if you get, and it perhaps plays a little bit to Richard's point as well about, you can take some big steps. My advice to you would be go and grab that stuff early. Go and do something early that will really give you a great learning experience, because it really does set you up very well for what you can do later on in your career. So I joined Tesco. I was the DC manager at Fenny Lock. I set up Step Change after that, which I'm now accountable for Step Change. So all of the mistakes I made first time round, I'm now paying for. I then got promoted to be the supply chain director in the IOD, which was a really interesting role, and that UK half the time. I came back to the UK to be the distribution director for general merchandise, then moved on to fresh and frozen, and then about it's about 4 years ago now, I guess, I went to China. And China's great to have in a presentation because you can show people all sorts of pictures and so on about China. And I was hoping David Hobbs was going to be here actually, because the DC that you can see there, I suppose that was my big legacy in China when I was working for David, opening up a distribution centre in China. And that's probably not now, but at the time that was the only distribution centre really of that kind in China. And again, I'd probably say my experience in China at a more senior level though, did absolutely pull together some of those things that I'd learned on my earlier international assignments. And that is that you'll do things that you would never otherwise do. And I know a load of us in China always used to say that every day in China you will see something that you will never see again, or you never would have seen in your life. And it was absolutely true. But that bit about being really resilient, about having to rely on yourself when you don't necessarily have the level of support around you, having to rely on your own instincts, your own experience, and your own intellect, actually is a great thing to do. And for me, going to China, like I said, it was great to do it kind of what was it? I guess it was the third or fourth time round going abroad, and really be able to understand what it was absolutely what it was like, and a great experience. And I think that's probably the other thing I would say about working abroad, is that professionally, and certainly in all of my experiences, professionally it's been really great. It's been really enjoyable, has really stretched me, and has allowed me to think about things a little bit differently and give me a different perspective on things, which have actually helped me in all of the other roles that I've done in my career. But the other thing is you get very rich experiences, so actually spending a couple of years in Shanghai and in other places in China, absolutely, then I've seen things that I never ever would have seen otherwise. So again, I would probably finish up by saying, if you get the opportunity to do something that seems slightly off the wall, if you get the opportunity to go abroad, if circumstances allow, my advice would be grab it. One, because I think professionally it will set you up really well for whatever you do afterwards. Secondly, you'll have some great experiences that you probably otherwise wouldn't have had. And thirdly, I think it teaches you about yourself. It teaches you about your resilience, about how great you can be when you haven't got a choice. So I hope that's given you a little bit of insight into working abroad. And if you want to come and ask me afterwards, how do you manage and sign off your own expenses, I'm only too happy to share that kind of experience with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Another couple of questions from the community. So from Michael Fernhead, how do you manage your work-home life balance?
I'm tempted to say really badly. I think that I must admit, personally, with my work-life balance, I find that I do what I need to do. So I kind of think that I don't feel guilty about the times when I go home at a normal time, or go and do things, or switch my BlackBerry off for the whole weekend. I don't feel guilty about that, because quite a lot of the time it's not like that. It's different. So I think my advice on managing your work-life balance would be, first of all, do what works for you, because it is different for everyone else or for everyone. What works for me might not work for you. So you have to make your own choice about that. I think the second thing is that do what you need to do, but when you have got an important commitment outside, or something that you really have to be, make the most of it. Don't do half and half. And I kind of think that's the mistake that lots of people make. They'll do half and half. So they'll go home early because they've got something really important to do, but they'll actually spend the time at home not really enjoying what they're doing, because they're worrying about whether they should be at work or not. So my advice would be, if you have got something to do that's important that you want to do and go and enjoy, then go and wholeheartedly enjoy it. Don't feel guilty about it. When you really do need to be at work because you've got something really important to do at work, throw yourself into that as well. And I kind of find if you're 100% in the moment, whether you're at work or at home, that's the best way to do it. And there isn't really a right answer, I get up at this time, I work this. It's different for all of us. So I think you have to find what works for you. My advice would be, live in the moment, whether you're at work or you're at home.
And from Mahim Kranapja, what's the biggest mistake you've made at Tesco? What did you learn from it? And how did it help you survive?
I'm tempted to say I've never made any mistakes at all at Tesco, but I think that's probably not true. The biggest mistake that I've made, I think that when probably in my first role at Tesco, when I was at Fenny Lock, and I arrived at Fenny Lock, and it it was in a difficult place, to be honest. It wasn't giving great service to the shops, and some of you will remember that, I'm sure. And I think it probably took me too long to really be clear on what are the 4 or 5 things that we're going to do. I probably threw myself in too early, was doing lots, was being really, really busy, and you know, and making progress. But I feel like, you know, I look back now and I remember thinking, gosh, I've kind of done 8 weeks now, and I've done too much. I should have actually been sitting down and formulating a plan. So again, when you've got a real challenge and something that really needs to be sorted out, of course throw yourself in terms of finding out about it, but don't do stuff too quickly. Make sure you understand it, then put together a plan about what you're going to do about it. So I think that's probably, on reflection, what I would change if I could find a time machine somewhere. Okay.